Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined today by Mr. David Evans, who is the co-founder and head of supply chain innovations at a company called Orchestrated Intelligence. How are you today, David?
Yeah, I'm good, Matt. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
If you don't mind, David, could you tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'll do that in two phases, Matt. I'll kind of talk a little bit about myself, and then I'll give you a very brief introduction. And I know we're going to maybe get a little bit into the journey of orchestrating intelligence. So my backstory is I've spent nearly 30 years in supply chain management, operating primarily in the space where business problems meet systems and technology, which is fortuitous because, the whole digitization story kind of fits very much with what I've always done, really. So my first degree was in business, but I've also got an MSc in supply chain from Cranfield here in the UK and an MSc in computer science, which gives you a little bit of an insight into my kind of background and where I kind of enjoy working. So prior to founding Orchestrated Intelligence Inc., or we call it Oii.ai for short, I worked in pretty much all of the various business functions of supply chain for a number of big kind of companies, primarily in the pharma sector, where my focus is always around planning and specifically planning systems, deploying them, developing them, and kind of leading operations whose success was kind of dependent on them. And I guess the start point of my kind of entrepreneurial journey was that I saw that there was a kind of major kind of flaw in the way those systems worked, and felt, that there had to be a better way to leverage the way those systems behaved. And I guess the Oii.ai story begins with me kind of meeting a guy called Bob Rogers, whose background was in sort of technology and AI, and the two of us kind of hitting it off and thinking, okay, there was an opportunity for us to go and do something together. And at that point, I kind of stepped out of the kind of corporate world and jumped in two-footed into the world of startups.
So you stepped out and jumped in. You said two-footed, so both feet into the deep end. What was that like for you?
It was different, but very exciting. And I suppose if I kind of give you a little bit more of my kind of story is that, before I was kind of in the corporate world, in my youth, I was always in kind of bands and, sort of putting on clubs and this sort of stuff. So whilst I was always in the kind of corporate world, for much of my career, I always kind of felt that I had a kind of little bit of a kind of entrepreneurial mindset on the side. And so actually doing that full time was kind of really exciting. You move away from a world where you're kind of judged on, how well you can, meet certain objectives set by other people, and, you can kind of influence those people to think you're doing a good job, into a world where none of that really matters. What really matters in the entrepreneurial world is that you build a product that people want and you're able to sell it. So yeah, it's been exciting.
So it's been exciting for you. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that are happening currently. Tell us a little bit about where the company is, what sort of trends are catching your attention, and what is the driving force behind their significance? How is this working for you? What have you done?
Yeah, well, let me tell you a little bit about the kind of journey of Orchestrated, because I think it is an interesting one. Our business sort of came into existence really through a number of kind of fairly fortuitous synchronicities, taking account also, I guess, of the kind of the benefits of global communications that probably wouldn't have enabled us to kind of exist in a previous era. So I guess, as I said, the start point for Oii.ai is that I had this idea, or rather I kind of identified this problem with the existing systems, and I felt it was a problem that was kind of critical to solve, and I was also aware that it was a highly lucrative problem to solve. And so I had this issue. I'd seen it in a number of organizations that I'd worked in. Essentially, the problem is, if you expand it a little bit more, is that all of the planning systems which are critical to the way supply chains work, are essentially manual in terms of the way they are set up, designed, and configured. And also, all of those systems are really deterministic in as much as they're not able to kind of deal with variability, which of course is a key underlying sort of factor of all supply chains. And it's a key factor that kind of drives the kind of supply chain disruption that we see. So I kind of saw this issue. I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe artificial intelligence would be a kind of way to solve this problem. This was about 5 years ago, just when everyone was started to talk about AI. And then I guess where the synchronicity comes in is that I had the fortuitous opportunity to meet this guy called Bob Rogers. Now, Bob's background is totally different to mine, and he lives in the other side of the world. So Bob's in San Francisco. His background is not in supply chain; it's in physics and sort of deep technology and modeling, etc. So he was really a kind of big figure in the world of kind of data science, and happened to be writing a book about how AI could be applied across different sectors of commerce, right? And he wanted to speak to a supply chain person. So he reached out to me. He happened to be in London. We met up. And from that, we kind of realized that, well, first we hit it off, which I think is always a good thing in business, right? And secondly, we kind of realized, okay, his background in AI, my background is supply chain. This particular problem was something that was kind of worth jumping into. And I guess that was the kind of start of what's been about a 5-year journey. It's kind of been an interesting journey because I think about a year and a half in, suddenly COVID hit, which made a difficult challenge more difficult. In some ways, COVID's been great for us because it's kind of brought a lot of focus onto supply chain, but obviously it kind of also made it sort of difficult to sell some of the software because people were very focused on just fixing sort of day-to-day things. We're kind of now at a point where we've got seed funding. We're starting to scale the business. We've got a number of customers coming on board across a number of sectors. And I guess we're now kind of fairly well poised to start to establish ourselves, which of course, is always one of the biggest challenges of any business. Big companies tend to buy from other big companies. And so getting your name known and sort of getting that credibility takes a bit of time, but we're starting to get there actually. So it's exciting.
You're making progress, and it sounds like there's an upward trend happening at the moment. 5 years is not a long time, so you're doing well. And like you said, COVID as well, not something easy to deal with. While we're talking about forward momentum, let's talk about some of the trends in your industry, some things that might be catching your attention, and what the significance is around these trends. Why are they important at the moment?
Let me pick out 3 things. There are 3 trends which I think critical actually, and I think they're 3 trends that we very much support and are kind of integral to our offering. So I suppose the first one's artificial intelligence and machine learning. And like I say, when we started this business 5 years ago, people were just starting to really talk about it, and now everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. I guess the thing with artificial intelligence is, of itself, it's not that significant, I don't think. I think everybody's suddenly starting to talk about artificial intelligence, but actually, I think it's more important to kind of twist it on its head and kind of focus on, how artificial intelligence can support. And I guess that's where, artificial intelligence has been so critical to our journey. I guess I mentioned that the problem that these supply chains have is this design problem, but I think it's a problem very, very suited to artificial intelligence because of its complexity. Designing end-to-end supply chains is hugely complex for a number of reasons, and artificial intelligence is a perfect tool to address that because its ability to kind of deal with massive amounts of data and cope with uncertainty and variability. So we've got this highly complex modeling task, which I think really requires simulation and comparison of kind of multiple potential options. And AI really enables you to do that. It enables you to take data from multiple different sources and essentially pull together these models of supply chains, which you can then simulate to see how they perform against different scenarios of risk, costs, demand and supply variability. So our software answers this problem. It essentially creates these digital twins, and I'll talk about that as another trend as well. But our software builds these kind of digital twins, which it uses to simulate how a supply chain would perform, and through that compare different potential configurations and evaluate how those different potential configurations would drive different cost models, would drive different customer service levels of performance, inventory, etc., etc. So I think AI is a big trend. Our software, essentially uses AI to answer this design question. I think that the second trend, and I touched on it, is digital twin. And again, one of the challenges of supply chain is that supply chain often feature, particularly in big companies, data that is kind of dispersed across multiple systems and held in multiple different formats. And it's often really, really difficult to kind of piece all that together and really kind of make sense of what's going on. The beauty of a digital twin is that you can use a digital twin to kind of pull all that data together and then essentially replicate an end-to-end supply chain so that you've kind of replicated it in terms of its physical format, but you've also replicated it in terms of the data that underpins that and the kind of parameters which determine how that complex network behaves. And so we're able to kind of create these digital twins in our software and then simulate how they perform. And through that, we can kind of evaluate what would happen in different scenarios, variability, different scenarios of kind of cost objective. And through that, you're able to kind of sort of see, okay, firstly, what would the optimal setup be? But then on top of that, you can kind of run sort of what if scenarios. So you could sort of ask the supply chain the question, what if we wanted to try and reduce our inventory to a certain level so we could free up cash? Or what if, a particular part of the supply chain, the costs change, which is obviously something that happens a lot with inflation, etc. All of those things you can kind of simulate and come up with answers. And as much as anything, as you come up with those answers, understand what the implications of those changes would be, and also sort of the trade-offs. So I think AI is a big trend that I think is key for us. Obviously, digital twin, and I think the third one, and people are talking about it a lot now, ever since ChatGPT came onto the radar, is generative AI. And that's something that we started to build into our capability. Again, it's kind of cutting edge and everyone gets excited about it, but you really have to have, I think, a real use case for it. Our use case is that generative AI is enabling us to create a kind of interface where rather than, what ifs being quite complex, generative AI makes those very dynamic so that users can, using natural language, set the parameters of scenario, which they then run. So, for example, you could ask the software, what would the optimal design be for our supply chain to hit a particular service strategy? And, just by putting that in natural language, you might sort of set, the precise parameters of that. The tool will then go off and create that scenario and come back, with some answers. So, those are the kind of three things. All of this stuff, 5 years ago, would have kind of been a bit space age for me, but, I'm kind of really in it. And it's really exciting to see how, some of these things can come to life, with the types of kind of tech people we've got on the team.
So, David, I'll be honest with you. I think I think the guys listening to this will understand a lot more of what you just said. But it sounded extremely intricate. And something that you mentioned that I wanted to touch on. You said 5 years ago this would have sounded pretty space age to you. So you've been yourself on quite a learning journey getting to this point, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely, Matt. I mean, there's a thing with AI that everyone kind of thinks it can do everything. But actually, the big learning for me is that AI and all of these new technologies are only, I think, as useful as the application that you put them to. So for me, I'm kind of working with a team of tech guys who, I mean, I don't know what goes on under the hood precisely of the software. But my part of the equation is to say, okay, could we, ask this question of the software, and could it come back with an answer? And it can, right? I mean, obviously, it involves coding, and there's a whole load of things that go on there. But to be able to design something where you could ask a simple question of a supply chain, which is, supply chains are complex. They're complex organisms, often global and all those sort of things. But you can ask a question of that, and the tool will then go off and it will kind of set the terms of reference for how that question is going to be put to the software, and the software will come back and then tell you what to do. And the other thing with our software is you can approach it from a very complex angle of looking at all the things that are going under the hood. Or, ultimately, it just comes back with a very simple answer. And one of the simple answers could be, just tell me, what stock I need to hold in my supply chain and where I need to hold it. And that will come back, and you can then configure that into your planning systems, and that will underpin how your supply chain works going forward.
That is incredible. So talking a little bit about going forward, David, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about what's in store for the future? Maybe expanding your development team. What sort of challenges do you think you'll face? Tell us what is in your future.
Yeah, well, I mean, the team thing is obviously a key to us. And I think as we expand the team, there's a number of challenges that we kind of face with that. As I say, we are a deep tech company, and consequently, the types of skills that we require are technical, both on the supply chain side, but also on the data science side. And consequently, they're expensive, and I think they're highly sought after. So I think for us, in terms of expanding the team, we need to be extremely proactive in seeking out those talents and being able to attract them into, what is essentially still a small company right at this moment in time. So our challenge is kind of competing with those big companies, which are obviously can offer a more secure career path, maybe a more glamorous career path, and obviously more money as well. So I think that's a challenge. We're fortunate in as much as our existing team, both Bob Rogers, but also our head of data science Vishnu Vyas, have strong links into that sort of data science world and Silicon Valley, tech world. So whilst we can't directly compete with those big companies, we do have the chance to offer, people the opportunity to join a small, exciting startup, and also to work alongside, some real kind of talents in that world. The other thing for us, I guess, particularly in this world of kind of, attracting those data science types talents, one of our advisors to Oii.ai is a lady who's a professor of artificial intelligence at Stanford University in the US, and so she helps to give us access to some of those kind of bright talents coming through. So that's good for us. As we kind of go forward, expanding our horizons so we can recruit beyond Silicon Valley where it's expensive, is something that we kind of need to look at. And I think that's going to be a kind of challenge for us. One of the great opportunities in the world of Zoom is you can be you don't need to all be in the same room, right? And our company is a good example of that. We got people in the UK, we got people in, in Asia, and we got people in the US, right? But the more you expand your reach, the more difficult it is to find those great people. So I think that's going to be a big challenge for us going forward. And then I think the other kind of challenge for us is continuing to kind of scale our business, and that's a little bit of it's a kind of bit of a domino effect. We've started to get some big names coming on board, and I think you get one big name, you get other big names, and we're expanding our sales kind of footprint, and as we expand the sales footprint, that brings us into the orbit of other kind of companies, and so that's starting to kind of really get some traction as well, which is exciting and challenging, right? Because we've got to balance the ability to meet the additional business with expanding the team, and doing that in lockstep, I think, is always a challenge for any small business.
David, before we go, I just want to say thank you for everything. Is there anything perhaps that you would like to leave us with? Maybe something that I missed over, something important, maybe where we can get hold of you if people are interested in what you're doing?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, I mean, people want to learn more about Oii. I would say go onto our website, and the website is very easy. It's an easy website name to remember. It's Oii.ai. And if you want to kind of read up about Oii, there's some more information on there. And if you want a demo of the software, or you want to really dive in deeper, all of our contact details can be found on there. So please feel free to reach out. Yeah, and we would, we're always excited to tell our story. We're conscious it's quite a technical story, and hopefully, that hasn't been too techy on this. Yeah, AI is exciting. Some people are scared of it. Some people are kind of excited by it. Some people think it will change the world for the better. Some think it will destroy everything. I think it's I think it's probably all of those things. And hopefully Oii is using AI to do something good in the world. I think we are.
Sure you are. That's terrific. So again, David, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, and we wish you all the best for the future. We will be keeping our eye on you, and hopefully we will have a catch up one of these days and see how things are going.
I'd like that. Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's been fun.